Hi everyone, it's Natalie here. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different, and instead of showing you how to make one of the Bible journaling pages, I'm going to go back to basics today. So what I want to teach you is Stamping 101, some of the absolute basics to get to know how to use these stamp sets that you might have acquired in the recent Illustrated Faith kits, because I know a lot of you, this is the first time that you've ever been faced with these sorts of suppliers, and you might have picked up some tricks here and there, but perhaps there are still some questions about how you actually go about using these and what's the best way of doing it, and is there any tricks, and what kind of ink should I use, and all of those sorts of questions. So that's where I'm going to start off today. And if you've got more questions, then of course please leave them in the comments, and maybe this might turn into a bit of a series, or we can certainly give you more hints and tips as we go. But let's start at some basics. So what you might have got is you've picked up one of the stamp sets out of the latest kit, and this one was out of the first one. This is out of Created to Create, and it comes just like this. It came in a packet with the stamp backing sheet, and you've taken that apart, you've cut it all apart, and you're left with this. And you got an ink pad that came with it. Was it the pink one? No, it was the green one, wasn't it? You got the green one first of all, or whatever colour you might want to call this, aqua or teal or something. And you're wondering how to go about putting these things together. So the first thing you're going to need is an acrylic block. Now, Illustrated Faith do make this acrylic block that you can get in the Dayspring shop, or of course there are many other crafting varieties out there, or at a pinch you can certainly use any other kind of sort of hard plastic. So even you can use the lid off your stamp pad if you'd like. So you need an acrylic block, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a block of acrylic plastic, and you peel off the backing sheet, peel off whichever stamp you're going to use. So let's go with the scissors, because that's one of my favorite. In fact, what we need to do is I need to show you how to use one of these that I've not used before. So let's go with Beautiful, because for some reason I haven't yet used that stamp. So I'm peeling it off, and you can see it's a stretchy, plasticky, floppy stamp, and that's why you need your acrylic block. And you just literally, you put it on. You'll see that there's a smooth side, which is the back, and the bumpy side, which is the stamp. And obviously you put the back, the smooth side, down onto your block, and it will stick really quite nicely there. So see, now it sticks. If you're finding that it doesn't stick, like when it gets a bit old, often, you know, when it gets a bit of dirt or fluff or whatever on the back, it doesn't stick very well, then you just need to clean it. So you just need to wash it with some warm soapy water and then leave it to dry, and it will become sticky again. Okay, so you've mounted it onto your acrylic block. Now, the first time you go to use a new stamp, it sometimes seems like there's a bit of some kind of maybe chemical residue or something from the manufacturing process over the top of the stamp, and when you use it for the first time, sometimes the ink beads up on it and you get a bit of a splotchy image. The way to stop that from happening is to make sure that you prep your stamp the first time. There are a couple of ways of doing that, and they're really easy. One of the things you can do is to just take an ordinary eraser. This is one of my kids' erasers, and you just rub it over the surface of the stamp, and it just seems like that removes any of that sort of sticky chemical residue. Or the other, even more simple way that I find is to literally run it on the back of my arm, and because we inevitably have a bit of sort of oil and dirt and stuff on our skin, it just preps this stamp perfectly. And now we can go ahead and stamp it, obviously maybe in our journaling Bible or our faith journal or whatever we're going to use. Today I'm just going to do it on some plain old paper here. This is just drawing paper, just so I can do lots of examples here. So I might rip a page out. You've got your ink pad. Obviously take off the lid. you just keep it nice and flat and just kind of pounce it on the top. Now I'll tell you a little bit about these inks in a minute, but this type of ink, which is a pigment ink, has quite a sort of spongy ink pad there, so you don't want to press it really hard, otherwise you're going to get ink all over your acrylic block as well. So you just want to dab it onto the surface, and when you think that it's all nice and inked up, press it flat down onto your paper. I gently rock it a little bit back and forth just so I know that I'm getting all like the tops and the bottoms of the letters, and then peel it straight off. And you can see that that has just stamped so perfectly. You will inevitably be left with, of course, some inky residue now on your stamp. You've got two options. I often just get a scrap piece of paper that, of course, I'm just going to throw away, and I just stamp it a few more times until all of that ink is off. And in fact, this is one of the techniques that you can use. Maybe I think it might be called like double stamping or whatever. So like obviously every time you stamp it, that ink gets faded and faded, and you can do some interesting sort of shadow effects if you like. So for example, you stamp the first time and then you stamp maybe just beside it and below it the second time, and you've got this shadow effect, if you can see that. And so the other way of cleaning it is just to get sort of a damp sponge, or in fact what everybody swears by and what I otherwise use is a baby wipe. I have a baby, so I have plenty of baby wipes on standby, and you can just quickly and easily, it's easier if you just clean it while it's still on the acrylic block, clean off your stamp like that, and then you can just pop it back into the packet and it's ready to be used the next time. So that is how you go about using your stamps. Now let me tell you a little bit about different kind of inks that you can use. So the Illustrated Faith ones that come in the kits are pigment dye. And the good thing about pigment dye is that they're a really bright and vibrant colour, and the reason that Illustrated Faith have made their ink pads in this pigment dye, or this pigment ink, sorry, is because the great thing about it is that it doesn't tend to soak into the paper. It tends to sit on the top of the paper. And so what that means, especially when you're using it in your Bible journaling or in your Bible, which tends to have really thin pages, it doesn't tend to bleed through onto the back. And so if I turn this over, you can see that there's no bleed through onto the back whatsoever. So that's perfect. If you want to think of sort of any downsides, then some things just to keep in mind is that because it doesn't bleed into the paper, it can sometimes take a little bit longer to dry, and certainly if you're ever going to be stamping it on glossy cardstock, it will not dry, and so you've got to be really careful to not sort of touch it and smudge it afterwards. Now, of course, there are lots of different other inks that you can get in the shops and on the market, and some of my other favourite ones are dye inks, and I've got tons and tons of these ones from Studio Calico specifically because fabulous colours. And the beauty of dye inks is that, again, they're really nice and bright colours, and they are not waterproof, which of course can be a downside, but if you're aware of that, you can also use these to do lots of different techniques where you can get them to react with water. And in fact, one of the things that I often use these inks for is not just for sort of stamping straight onto my paper, but to make my own sort of watercolor with. So I grab a piece of plastic, including just my acrylic block. I grab the stamp pad and put some ink onto my acrylic block, and grabbing a water pen or even just grabbing a paintbrush and dipping it in some water, get it a little bit wet, mix this up, and then you've actually instantly got yourself a water paint. And that's what I often use to paint with in my Bible, as well as stamp. The downside of these is, apart from them not being waterproof, they are sort of really juicy and they kind of soak into the paper, so they will definitely, or most of the time, they will definitely bleed through into your Bible, or bleed through your Bible pages. And I can show you plenty of examples because I tend to use these a lot. So down here, these are all dye inks, and over the back you can see that it clearly goes through the page. And I'm okay with that because I figure if I'm ever going to journal on the back of this, I'm going to stick something down to cover it up, but keep that in mind because that's really important to know. The last kind of ink that I'll just quickly tell you about is solvent ink, and the classic one is this StazOn ink pad. Now the reason that you would use one of these, or the best thing about these ones, is that they are permanent. So once they dry, and they dry really quickly, you can then paint over the top with watercolors, or color anything, mix water over the top, and it won't smudge at all. So let me give you an example. I'll grab my acrylic block back again. Let's go with this little paint tube. And if you've ever opened a solvent ink pad, they smell a lot, and I quite like the smell, but of course lots of people don't. So just stamping a couple of those, and it will dry pretty much instantaneously. And then if I just grab some water paint, and I'll just show you what happens. Even if I just go over the entire thing, it's not smudging whatsoever. So that's awesome if you're somebody like me who likes to use water paints or color in your images afterwards. Downsides of it is that it's most definitely permanent, and that includes that if you don't clean it off quickly. So you saw that when I used this, I quickly dabbed it off onto the paper so that it gets all the ink off the stamp quite quickly. But if you leave it there and don't clean it off, the ink will dry on your stamps and they will stain the stamps. Now I don't consider that a bad thing because it doesn't affect the way the stamp works in any way, shape or form. It won't come off on the next time you stamp. It will just make your stamp black. So some people of course don't like that, and if you are wanting to clean them, you actually have to buy a specific cleaner to get the ink off. Okay, let me quickly show you some examples in my Bible of the places and times where I've used it. So I showed you that page, that's with the dye inks and the fact that they do bleed through. These two pages, what I've done is I've stamped the shapes with the StazOn, which is the solvent ink, and then I've been able to paint over the top or use a different ink over the top, and it's not budged 1 inch, and including like this painting over here, so that's really handy. And they don't tend to sort of typically bleed through to the back too much. This is bled here where I've painted over the top with a watercolor, but often it will not sort of bleed through to the back so much. This was a different page using in the background a chalk ink. Now I haven't talked about chalk inks. They are very, very similar to a pigment ink, but tend to just dry with a more chalky finish. So that's a different kind that you can also get. This is another example where I have stamped these words with my solvent ink and then painted over the top. And it hasn't moved at all. Sorry, so I've got obviously lots of examples about that. And then this one here is where I've stamped all of these words with dye ink, different colors, and it has only bled through a little bit where it's been sort of quite juicy or quite wet, but otherwise you might get away with not having it bleed through to the back. So that's some basics about stamping. I hope that answers some of your questions about how you go about it and perhaps what kind of inks you might need to get. If you've got any other questions, as I said, please leave them and I might be able to answer them next time. All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye.